Some of your frequently asked questions.
Because it's not just drying out. Those roots are actively drinking.
What kinds of things can you plant midsummer for a fall harvest?
Keep the maintenance up because eventually you will get to a point where you have a low maintenance garden.
Wow.
Yeah, just tomatoes like to day drink. That's the takeaway from this.
Welcome back to the Helpful Gardeners podcast. How are we doing so far this summer? You know, we're kind of nearing towards the end of August, and maybe you're feeling a little bit of burnout. Maybe you've been out enjoying your garden. Maybe you're just thriving in your garden this year.
One of the reasons I think maybe it's just for what people do for a living. But summer used to be like go time.
Yeah.
Right? When I was landscaping, it was like, got to do this, got to do this. Like, got to make hay when the sun shines. So now that I'm nowhere near as busy and I can kind of do things on my own time and I enjoy the heat and I like warmth and whatnot, summer goes by too quick.
It really does.
Yeah.
It really does. And especially when we're up here in Canada and we don't get to garden all year round. And so we really...
Looking at you, Australia. Sorry.
I mean, I was thinking Florida, they get such a long growing season. So for us here in the northern country, we really have to kind of milk it, right? So it's been really lovely getting to interact with a lot of our listeners and with a lot of our customers and seeing how they're doing over the summer. And so I thought for today's episode, we'd sort of do a little bit of a garden checkup.
Okay.
And just see, some of your frequently asked questions, some of the questions we've been getting in the store, and just kind of maybe this has been something that you've been wondering about as we get into, deeper into the summer season. This might be able to help out with your garden as well. So let's start off with the first question. I accidentally planted a shady plant in a sunny area. Can I move it? Can I improve the area to better support the plant?
I would say, if it's an annual, it's up to you.
Yeah.
Okay. I did that. I've talked about that where I forgot that the tree was cut down.
Yeah, exactly. Conditions changed in your yard. Yeah.
So, and it wasn't until the season was well underway and I was just like, meh, they'll do what they do this year and I will fix it next year. Perennial or any kind of shrub that's in the wrong exposure, it needs to be moved because... Okay. We get a lot of people who come in and they see, say, a shrub they like. And they go, oh, my God, I love this shrub. And then they read and they go, oh, it gets 7 foot tall. The area I want to put it in, I only have 4 foot. Can I just keep pruning it? You can, but it doesn't like that.
Yeah.
Okay. It wants to get to the height that it wants to get at. So constantly cutting it back. And let's be honest, eventually you're going to be like, oh, my God, I got to cut this thing. It's like... hedges.
Yeah.
Right? So I would say perennial or shrub, definitely move it. You can always move it in the fall. You don't want to move it if it's too hot. If we get a cooler, rainy day, move it then. Put the plants to the location and let them thrive as opposed to trying to cheat the location because then you've constantly got a fight on your hands.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. Obviously, this is why I like putting annuals in pots because then you can easily move the pot around. But if you are dealing with a garden bed, then it gets a little trickier. So next question is, how can I protect my garden from extreme heat? Strategies for shading plants and ensuring adequate hydration. Obviously, I think we've had a couple episodes in the past where we did talk about extreme heat and weather related events and how that has an impact on your garden. So what I'll do is I'll go into our podcast show notes over at goldenacre.ca/podcast, and you can take a peek at those episodes, but just sort of like a brief summary on how you can protect your garden from extreme heat.
Make sure the plants are drinking. So again, I don't know if you've noticed, because I know you guys only moved in a little while ago, and sometimes it takes like a full season to kind of realize where the heat spots are.
Yeah.
But I have one spot that gets scorching. So it gets blasted by sun. It's framed in on almost 3 sides. There's only 2 little kind of walkways. So there's no real airflow. It's really hot. And then it's up against one of the walls is the garage. And that's white. Well, it's off-white. It's gray. So it gets all the reflected sun too.
Wow.
A lot of plants don't like it there, but you know what loves it there? Tomatoes and peppers.
Aha, yes.
So I play to the condition.
Yeah.
Right? But if you can't do that, because I hate it when people answer questions like, what's the safest way to ski? Don't ski. You're like, thanks for not answering my question.
But I wanna.
Yeah. So if your garden is really stressed, there's not much you can do about a lawn. If you're not putting on a sprinkler and you know, follow city regulations. You might only be allowed once a week. You might be allowed to do it whenever you want. You might not be allowed to do it at all. So you have to keep aware of regulations. You can build frames with bamboo and put shade cloth over them. So shade cloth basically keeps the heat off, but it still allows airflow. It still allows some UV to get through so your plants won't be suffering, but you don't want to leave it up all the time. I think because we garden in Calgary, we're more prepared for adverse conditions, because you go elsewhere in Canada and you're like, oh, well, just run out and put up your shade cloth like you would put up your blankets for hail. People are like, I don't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh, you know when you get frosts in June? Nope.
Yeah, I remember that. Nanton getting snow in June. Like, and that's the thing. We gotta like Big Brother. It's like expect the unexpected,
Exactly.
right? Especially gardening in Alberta, where you're just gonna get thrown with a whole bunch of stuff. And actually, I'm really glad that you brought up lawn, because we had a specific sort of side question to that question, and it did have to do with lawn, and especially when you say you're busy in the summertime. I had somebody ask if they needed to wait until they came back to start lawn seed, or if they could preemptively, like, you know, put down the lawn seed, water it in really well, and then just cover it with some kind of material just to kind of trap the moisture until they get back, and then they can protect it. What would you say?
Ideally, don't seed in the heat. There are times when something is better done, but there are times when you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Right? Let's say they don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Right? They need to seed now, whatever that reason is. Put the seed down, but then cover the seed, but not with material. What ends up happening is you put a cloth over it, a fabric, burlap, whatever. And you soak that, and then it'll absolutely keep some moisture in the soil. But then what happens is the grass starts growing through it, and then you go to remove the burlap, and you have a chance of damaging the grass beneath it.
Right. Yeah.
So if that grass has come through and the burlap's got a tight weave and 4 blades have come through and you pull the burlap, you can rip that tender grass out.
Yeah.
And then you don't want to leave rotting burlap on your lawn, because that's going to do you no favors either. What I would do is I would top dress. So put your seed down to whatever it recommends. So if it's totally bare, you put it down thicker. If it's just kind of patchy and thin and you want to thicken it up, you kind of, what I do call feeding the chickens. And you scatter it like that. Then get a bag of topsoil or a bale of peat moss or coir, whichever you prefer. Take a shovel and just dump it out on top of the seed. Then take your rake, but you flip it. Because if you use the teeth in your rake, you end up raking up the seed.
Right. So if you're on the backside, it's like a leveler.
You can, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You sieve it and you're smoothing it. So you level it, heavily water that will trap moisture. It will also keep birds and squirrels from grabbing the seed.
Oh, there's another. Yeah.
And then if you want, you can fertilize, use like a liquid fertilizer, a water-soluble hose end one, or use a granular, whatever you prefer. And then that stops the fertilizer directly contacting the seed.
Yeah.
Because a lot of lawn fertilizers, high nitrogen can burn roots.
Oh, yeah.
So you keep that off of the seed. That has to now filter through your layer of peat moss. And you're talking like 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch max of soil or peat moss. Saturate that, and then when you're away, hopefully it rains a little bit, and that will again hold the moisture on the seed, and then the seed should germinate.
I love that. So there is a way to do it. Just kind of thinking outside the box a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, because I like that they brought up, because a lot of people don't, but I like that they brought up, is there something I can put down to trap the moisture?
Yeah, they were thinking about the process of a seed.
Yep.
And so, then they come back, and then hopefully they'll have some grass growing. How can we protect our greenhouses from extreme heat? Because I know how hot it gets downstairs in our greenhouse. So what can you do? Just a lot of airflow?
Yeah, any good greenhouse should have roof vents. Okay, so you want to pop them, heat risers. So greenhouses are great for starting plants early, but then you should get them into the garden. The ones that you keep in there, again, might be your peppers or your tomatoes, your heat-loving ones that are really going to thrive. Pop the vents, because greenhouses, they are amazing, right? There's so many good things to be said. You can extend the season both in the spring and in the autumn. But a lot of times they can become breeding grounds because animals can scurry in there, like small little rodents or bugs, because there's no adverse conditions. There's water for them. It's nice and warm. Can become a breeding ground for... Calgary is lucky for that. You know what? We always trash Calgary's weather. Let's give them a shout out here. Because it's so dry and hot, we don't get... I know powdery mildew does affect people, but... compared to East Coast with the humidity they get, powdery mildew isn't really an issue here.
No.
We can play to that, but if your greenhouse doesn't have a vent, maybe look and see if you can pop one of the panels or see if you can construct your own vent and allow it to vent. I know some people, I've talked to them, and they'll run an extension cord and a fan because it's covered, and they'll duct tape where the fan plugs in so there's no water, and they'll put a fan in the greenhouse.
Oh, great.
Yeah, because it's not going to get rained on.
Yeah.
It's covered, and then they'll run a fan to simulate that airflow, and then you can put it at the back. You could put two in if you wanted, one blowing air forward and then one blowing it out the door, or vent it straight out. So there are options, but greenhouses, they are awesome, but you just got to be careful what's in there.
Yeah, I love that. We had a lot of questions where it was a lot of people, like you were saying, spring was really busy. And so a lot of people are kind of late to the gardening game.
Yep.
They saw that seeds are still available to purchase at their garden center. And they're just wondering, what kinds of things can you plant midsummer for a fall harvest?
So you can do lettuce, radish, bok choy. There are some fast ones, but be careful because a lot of those seeds, when you start them and it's too hot, they can bolt. So
what's bolting again?
So bolting is like, you know, when you put a lettuce in and it grows and the leaves are all coming out and it's forming a nice head and it's great. You put lettuce out in like 34 degrees full sun, you're just going to get a straight up. And it just bolts straight up. And a lot of them, broccoli, kale, lettuce, a lot of the root veggies, radishes, carrots, whatnot, they're what we call cool starters. So you can get them out in April.
Yeah.
Hopefully they don't start and then you get a hard frost. But you know, frost blankets, yay. But some of the ones that you look at and you go, oh, I can harvest this in 30 to 60 days. I'm willing to risk that we're not going to get a frost.
Yeah.
But the problem is then make sure they're in a cooler area of your garden in the shade.
Okay.
You put them in full sun. The vast majority of the time, I did a plot, thought it was in a good place, had it all set up, and I was just doing some succession planting. And I was like, yeah, I'll start some more. Summer, I got nothing to lose. I thought it was in a good location. Didn't realize just how hot the deck got, even in the shade.
Yeah.
And they all bolted. Yeah, actually, not all of them. The kale did, the spinach did. No, the kale and the lettuce did, the spinach didn't. Read the back. There's different varieties. Maybe some, are better for not bolting and whatnot. But again, we've talked about it. The ambient air is more than warm enough. Warmth, moisture, and your seed will germinate. It doesn't need to be in the full sun. I would say keep it out of the full sun.
Here's something I've never thought about, because you know that deck material, what's it called? Not the wood deck. It's the...
Oh, like the recycled plastic?
Yeah.
I can't remember the actual name of it.
Yeah, I can't remember what that's called. If you know, please comment to help us out. But I know it gets quite hot in summertime, especially under direct sunlight.
Yep.
So do you ever have to be worried about your planters that sit directly on that type of material or on a hot location? Like, is the heat from below going to do anything with the roots or anything other than dry out the soil quicker, probably?
Just dry out. The roots want to be warm.
Okay.
That's why on my deck, I've got an area that is essentially full sun. It gets a little bit of shade. And when I say full sun, I don't mean like 6 to 8 hours. I mean like the sun comes up in the morning, hits it, and finally stops hitting it at like 7 at night.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it is bathed in sunlight. And I put tomatoes there in black pots. And one of them, I didn't trim it because I just wanted to see what it would do. And I think it got 8 foot tall.
Wow.
Yeah, just Jenny got a picture. It was above the patio doors, hit the eaves, and was starting to go that way. With that being said, I was also having to water it 3 times a day.
Oof.
Because it was drying out. It was so big, a shallow root system, obviously. So the roots were drinking everything. It was drying out because of the conditions. So I'd wake up in the morning, early riser, while my coffee is brewing, go out, and I would flood them. Okay, that was one specific huge one. And I would flood it like till the water was like all the way up in the pot. If I didn't water it again by noon, the leaves were starting to wilt.
Really?
Yeah. Because it's not just drying out. Those roots are actively drinking. Remember what we've talked about? If I'm not thirsty or I'm not hungry, I can stop eating and stop drinking. Okay? A plant cannot. Right? If there is light and there is CO2, the plant is trying to photosynthesize. You take away water and it can't photosynthesize, but it's going to keep trying. So you have a plant in full sun like that in a black pot, it's going to love you, but you better be giving it a drink.
Okay. So keeping a close monitor on those plants. And
tomatoes like to day drink. That's the takeaway from this.
And peppers.
Yeah.
And peppers.
That's my new slogan t-shirt.
What, tomatoes like to day drink?
Yeah. Day drinking like a tomato.
Our final frequently asked question is all about sort of those garden tasks. And I think it's really important to talk about it this time of year because some of those tasks that due to busyness, due to the heat, they may have been let go for a couple of weeks. You may start to see a lot of plants that need deadheading. You may see an increased amount of the weeds in your garden. And so we've been getting a lot of, my weeding has gone out of hand. Is there any way to mass weed in my established garden without basically like destroying your plants? So I think we can pretty much cover like the garden bed, the lawn, all of that kind of thing. Is there, like, I know in the past we've sort of talked about digging in and turning the soil, but if you're in established gardens, how is that going to react?
I feel like that's you asking that question. Are you like asking for a frequently asked question?
Right, and it's true, right?
Yep.
Like around this time of year, you've been enjoying your garden, you've been going out camping, hiking, or whatever,
Yep.
and so maybe some of those garden tasks, and I know doing a little bit here and there is ideal, but if you're just feeling burnt out by the end of it, and you're just like, hey, I have set aside 4 hours, I'm going to tackle my garden and get it all done today. What's the best way to go around that, or is the hand weeding each individual one the only way?
So you don't want to wake up and be like, got to get in the garden. But I promise you, it's better to be in the garden at 7 a.m. than at 2 p.m. Okay? It's not comfortable. You burn out quicker. I mean, I've been in my garden before at 6 a.m. weeding, not disturbing anybody. Nobody even knows I'm there.
Yeah, a nice quiet garden, sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's relaxed. But it depends where the weed is in your established bed.
Okay.
Okay. So if the weeds, whatever, are growing in between plants and you can get a cultivator in there, go ahead, rip them out. Use I always like it this time of year to use a diamond hoe. So a diamond hoe has literally got an edge on it like that, and it's a point, and you just push it into the soil and it cuts the weeds under the soil. But the reason I like it is I'm going very shallow. Okay, now I'm cutting that weed, it will come back. But if I keep cutting it, eventually those roots will die because the roots hold the energy. I cut it, it's like, screw you, man. And it sends out more growth. I cut that and it's like, oh, screw you, man. It sends out. But eventually it's not photosynthesizing. So those roots are losing energy every time. So eventually I will win if I keep and that's why I always say keep the maintenance up because eventually you will get to a point where you have low maintenance gardens. But if you have weeds, and you'll see it because the seed will land right next to a perennial, say. You got this gorgeous hosta and a dandelion coming up right. Yeah. You've got the hosta roots like this. And then the dandelion has gone in, and then the root has gone through. And so you have to kind of just break the head off. Now, the good thing there is the hosta will help you. You break that head off, it's sending out leaves, but it's not getting sun because the hosta is shading it out.
Yeah.
So it can play to that, but you can always do what I do, and every once in a while throw cash at Harry and his friends.
I mean, that's a really good point, actually.
$20 to the neighborhood kids.
Yeah.
You know, and point out what they need to do. And I mean, Harry is a bit of a cheat code for me because he's been gardening with me for so long. I sent him out a while ago, way behind on everything. It was actually back in the spring. And I sent Harry out to do the garden. I said, I want the lawn done. I want the beds weeded. I want the whole thing done. I'm paying him. I don't expect him to give up his time. And he said, no problem. That was the entire length of our conversation. And everything was done. My perennials were amazing. Every weed was gone. He even used the leaf blower to clean everything off at the end. He cut the grass. So Harry is a bit of a cheat code because I don't have to tell him now what's a weed and what's a perennial.
True, yeah.
Right?
I know it's not always like that, but...
Yeah, we did a cleanup one time in Montreal. A customer came over, a potential customer. They ended up becoming a customer, but they came over. I was working on a garden and they were like, we really love seeing what you guys do. This garden looks amazing. Could you do our garden? I said, okay, well, let me finish this. And before we leave, I'll come over and talk to you. Can you give me some time? They said, yep. So we had a very simple rule. Before we got into any garden, you had to do a cleanup. And that was to bring the garden up to our standards. Then we could start maintaining it. And it was a big cleanup. It was a big property too. And at the end of the day, the guy pulled in, I guess he got off work, and he came up and he's like, he wasn't angry, but he was like concerned and upset. And he's like, excuse me. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, what happened to all my plants that were here? And I was like, they were weeds.
He didn't know.
Nope. And the people who'd been gardening there before us had been maintaining them as perennials.
Oh, no.
And he was like, what? And I showed him, I explained, and I was like, look at the garden across the road. Do you see this plant in there? Like, it is a noxious weed. It will get out of... And he was like, oh, my God. And he had a bare spot, maybe half the size of our table, where this weed had been let go because they had no idea what they were doing.
Did he get a little excited that he could like fill that spot with some fun stuff?
After we got them through it and whatnot, then they were like, "Ooh, we cut a new bed for them." They got really into it, and it was wonderful to see.
Okay,
I am very lucky with Harry, but you know what? If you've got a bed and you can grab a relatively savvy neighborhood kid, your kid's friends, and be like, "These are my perennials. These are not. Weed these out." They can do the job for you.
Yeah. Okay. So there's an option. I mean, I feel like the work always seems daunting, and then you get into it and you have the radio playing and you have like a bottle of water and you're content and you're sitting down, and I think that the time will go by a lot faster and you might even get into it, right? So
first of all, I say this frequently, and I'll say it again. Who gives a damn what your neighbors think? Okay. Until they're paying your bills, who cares if you've got weeds? Right? They're not living your life. See you later, neighbor. Could care less what my neighbors think. Like in the spring, Jenny's like, we're going to cut our lawn. I'm like, yep. When I get to it, it is so far down my priority list. Pollinators are loving it. I don't care. It will get there and my garden will look amazing, but I am not worried about it right now. So don't care what your neighbors think. If the task is daunting, go out and do the easiest bed first. Because then you look at it when it's done. One bed, that's it. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Be like, today I'm going to do that. And then you're going to look, and it's going to look amazing, and you're going to feel good, and you're going to get that self-esteem lift, and then you're going to be like, I'm ready to tackle another one. Okay? And break it down like that. Don't treat it as a chore, and don't beat yourself up. Okay? And if you don't get to it, winter will come soon enough, and then it'll be covered in snow, and then you can forget about it, and then you can get to it in the spring. Well,
and what I really like to do too is you tackle one bed, and then you move on to a different task. So you're kind of like, it's like whenever I'm editing the podcast, I'm like, I take breaks and go for a walk, because it's sort of just switching up that mindset and the different body parts that you're using and muscles that you're using. So I'll just go over and start deadheading something, or I'll go over and water something, and then I'll come back to the weeding, and then you just sort of cycle through. Oh, it's like circuit training.
There you go.
You're working out.
There you go. Exactly. And it is a workout, and you can get that. But yeah, I do everything as I go. So as I'm going, I'm weeding, I'm deadheading. By the time I get to the end, I'll go back and I'll edge it, and I'll do another tip. all of the weeds you got, just throw them over your shoulder onto the lawn and then cut your grass. Always cut your grass last. It's like if you're building a house, you don't put down your flooring and then start painting and drywalling. Okay, you do that last, and then if you make a mess on the plywood, who cares? You're going to cover it with flooring. Same thing. Get all of that done, throw everything into the lawn, pass the lawnmower, and you're like, I did a cleanup too.
Yay! Yeah. I love that. That does wrap us up for another week in the garden. We hope that you're enjoying time outside and that your garden's doing well. And just remember to take care of yourself. Don't get burned out. Little jobs here and there during the cooler parts of the day. It'll go a long way. Just thank you for making the world a more planty place. Join us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you stream your favorite voices. Subscribe, tell your friends, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We're under Golden Acre Home and Garden. If you're in the area, come visit.
Come visit. Yeah, that's always the favorite.
Exactly. And
say hi if you see us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we'll catch you next weekend.
Bye, everyone.